and a great topic. Mr. Dominic Delmolino is the Federal Services Chief Technology Officer at Accenture. He's responsible for the oversight, strategy, and definition of Accenture Federal Services technical offerings. In his career, Mr. Delmolino has assisted clients in the application of leading-edge data management and software development productivity solutions. Sounds a lot like what we've been talking about this morning. Mr. Delmolino is an expert in system and data modernization, agile application, and database development for high performance and rapid deployment of large-scale systems. He also specializes in technical complex cloud infrastructure and application development sales efforts for Accenture. In addition to a BS in computer science from Cornell University, he earned his master's degree in information data science at the University of California in Berkeley. Regarding his profession, he most enjoys the aspect of continuous innovation and the potential to make all people more productive. Mr. Delmolino, we're privileged to have you here today, and we look forward to your look into the fourth industrial revolution. If you haven't been exposed to the fourth industrial revolution, you're in for a very thought-provoking discussion this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dominic Delmolino.
Okay. All right, checking to see. Good, we're all good here. So thank you all for having me today. I'm looking forward to this discussion. I'll talk a little bit about how things are transforming in the travel industry in particular, and how the fourth industrial revolution and its aspects apply in that industry. A little bit, you heard the nice introduction. I appreciate that. I really enjoy definitely applying technology to improve people's lives, make it more efficient, seamless, and easy, and see how technology can make experiences much more enjoyable. With that in mind, just some quick facts about Accenture and what we do from a travel perspective. Not many people know this, but we actually provide services to all of the top cruise companies. We have 4 travel innovation centers worldwide so that we can address needs not only of an OCONUS or CONUS type of population, but also worldwide capabilities with regard to how travelers operate culturally and differently around the world. We have 7 dedicated delivery centers for travel expertise. And as I mentioned, we do that in over 39 languages across the globe. So we really like to think of ourselves as an enabler for many of the global travel companies around the world. So I guess the topic here, of course, is the fourth industrial revolution, and I'm going to tease the fifth one with you a little bit too. But for that, I want to just make sure that you're ready for what's next. And some of the things I'm going to weave in come from the recently released Accenture Technology Vision for 2019. So you're getting an early look at that information and content as well. So let's first start out with what we've seen even from last year. Basically, what we're seeing is that customers are now starting to apply what they have in their personal lives toward their professional lives. And we call this liquid expectations. Their experience of applying for a mortgage with one touch on their phone is something they now bring to bear when they're engaging in professional operations and activities. They're like, why can't the activity that I enjoy managing through my personal devices be as seamless and enjoyable in my professional world as well? When I arrange an experience of travel through my environments as from a personal perspective, can I also have that professionally and business travel too? Clearly, digital has altered everything. We actually now believe we're entering what we call the post-digital era, and this is kind of the fifth industrial revolution, is beyond digital. And this is the idea that not only are we having digital experiences, but the digital and physical worlds are merging, so much so that our digital worlds almost are a reflection of our physical world. You may have heard the term digital twin. It's a notion that we're actually able to take as very much amount of physical data, model it in the digital world so that the digital experience almost mirrors the physical experience. And then we take the digital experience and we can reflect it back onto the individual through a variety of multiple channels now, whether it's a wearable watch or a phone or shoes or other kinds of haptic feedback devices that we carry with us at all times. So the digital transformation is certainly underway in the consumer market, and we're seeing it definitely start to appear in the federal world as well. The pace of technology has just been so rapid. It's not only Moore's law, the fact that computing power keeps to doubles at a frequent rate, but also the data available to feed into these massively parallel computing algorithms has also exploded. We believe that we'll have 10 times as much data in 2020 as we did in 2010, to give you an idea. It's almost like 90% of the world's data keeps getting created every 10 years. So it's amazing the amount of data we have available and the amount of horsepower we have available, both on premise and in the cloud, to actually make some of these amazing predictions and integrate data from edge devices like IoT and wearables and sensors on cars and what's going on the plane and what's going on in the airport and what's going on at the curb and when did you leave your house to get to a flight. All of those things now can be aggregated, collected, and processed and predicted, which is really quite amazing. So this is a little bit of that fourth industrial revolution slide I have. I'm trying to see if I can get some of this in here. The 1800s is your basic industrial revolution, the 1900s, the 2000s, and now in 2016. Actually, I think I have it here on this one. And it basically talks about today is the 4.0, right? The fourth industrial revolution. And this is the cyber physical kind of thing I was talking about earlier, where we're having digital and physical worlds merging and becoming one, if you will. And then in the post-digital era, we're actually using the digital world to imagine new ways, almost things we haven't thought of today that we can't even do. So the idea that, for example, virtual reality enables almost to the point now where I have a consumer-grade device that allows me to do VR without all those like cables and wires and not hooked up to anything. I actually got an Oculus Go for my son for Christmas, and I tried it out the other day, and I was amazed. It is truly the first consumer virtual reality device. And when you think about that at a price point, that headset is $200, which is really, it's cheaper than the phone I buy every year or so to stay up to date, right? But imagine that. It's now almost reasonable to think I could equip a conference room with 4 or 5 of these devices and enable virtual telepresence in a way that is almost unimaginable now. But I think we're on the cusp of being able to do some of these things. And it's not just the hardware. It's actually the processing power and the data I can push through that hardware now. It was funny, my son was playing with that headset, and I'm like, what are you watching? What are you doing? He says, I'm watching YouTube. I'm like, well, you can watch that on your phone. He says, Dad, I've got a 9-foot screen in here. So he was really excited to have that experience. So I also wanted to give you an idea of where we participate in travel. So now we're going to go back to kind of our approach and perspective on many aspects of the travel industry. Accenture does a large amount of service, of course, in the consumer world, and we bring those innovations from the consumer world and the retail world into our federal governments through the federal division that I get the privilege of working for. And so many of the things we do for our partners in aviation and hospitality and travel services, we look at those innovations, we look at how those industries are changing, and we try to understand and reflect and lens those into how does that impact the government from a travel perspective, from a travel office perspective. And it's really fun to see how the travel companies are innovating and then how we might reflect that back into our internal systems that support government individuals who have to embark on travel as well. There's a kind of an eye chart, if you will, or heat map of the different places we service and the different travel service companies that we work with, including some of the disruptors down the bottom. I was having a conversation earlier with one of my colleagues about Airbnb, and is that a hospitality option that government workers can take advantage of? And is that something we have a policy on, whether they can or cannot? Not only as someone who wants to stay at an Airbnb, but the flip of that, like if I'm on a long-term assignment, if I'm on a 6-month rotation or 1-year tour of duty, can I have someone manage my own residence to flip that back out, and so that I have someone who's staying there and I'm earning something from that as a reflective way to make sure my house keeps active, if you will. So just fascinating to see some of the innovative disruption that's occurring in this space. We talked about some of the innovative ways that car sharing has become much more a large part of people's experience, and to the point where they're allowing people to rent out their own cars. I'm not sure I trust that, right? I don't know that I'd want to rent rent out my own car or trust what car I was getting. But you see that, and I'll talk a little bit about people's expectations in that realm going forward. Some real challenges for the travel service market. A lot of competition, a lot of disruption, a lot of new entrants because of the lower barrier to entry on gathering information, processing, and using it. Some older systems. We're all familiar with the modernization challenge of our existing systems that have to be addressed and adapted. And then the customer segment is changing dramatically as well. The generations seem to be compressing. My daughter's Generation Z, she's 17, and she's already becoming a buyer of certain kinds of services. It's almost like the millennial generation is shrinking, and we're seeing a new entrance now of the Gen Z folks, which are really fascinating because they have a different perspective. Traveler anxiety around aspects around what's going on in the world. What information do they have? How do they react to those kinds of situations? What information are they given about how to react in a certain situation? Where do they go? What information do they get? People are used to consuming information on demand, and so when there's an event that might affect their ability to move or travel around, they want to know what to do, where to go, what that event entails. So very fascinating on the information flow as well. I'm not going to go through all of these trends, but we definitely go through all of this with our customers. We talk about their experience, their platforms they use, how are you aggregating and adding acquisitions, and you'll see some of that. I was talking to a friend of ours from SAP and Concur and how they've done that integration and how they've made that vibrant as an integration, and I'm really excited to see companies looking at ways to say, I need to add this innovative capability. How do I retain that innovation when I expand my set of service offerings? I thought that was really fascinating. Clearly, the constant drumbeat of customerization or hyper-personalization continues apace. The fact that there are new entrants like Google in terms of as a travel provider, it's really fascinating to think that a search engine or a YouTube hosting company is now getting into the travel business as well. Heavy automation, robotics, and we'll get into AI as well on customer service from a chatbot perspective or predicting behavior of individuals on travel. Can we make sure that we prep their room correctly, we have their service items correctly? Do they have hyperallergenic sheets in their room because of a known issue? How do you predict and maintain and have that hyper-personalization, have AI address that quickly when there's a question or when there's a need? A lot of quick reaction to changes. So the other day I was actually flying down to Orlando when that winter storm came through, and my wife said, "Hey, when's our flight?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's at 8." And she goes, "Okay, well, I want you to call and I want you to buy a ticket on the first flight out in the following morning." And I'm like, "Well, why?" She goes, "Well, if that flight gets canceled, everybody's going to try and get on that flight, so I want you to pre-book." And I said, "Well, okay." And I ended up buying a fully refundable ticket for the first flight in the morning. So it was a good thing I did because other flights during the day canceled. And I knew I had a seat on that flight the next morning. We got out okay. And as soon as I landed, I called up and I got my refund. But you think about the predictive element of saying, well, there's a high probability of this flight that I have to catch being canceled. What's the predictive options I have, and can I get ahead of that using AI or other features to say, well, what options, and so I don't have to maybe wait in a long line or have an unpleasant experience in rebooking. Let's move on to some of the others here. So it is interesting in that some of the integration going on between different travel organizations, changing data and connecting to their partners, not only from a technology perspective, but also from a workforce perspective. How does the workforce get enabled to have information so they can do what they need to do to assist a customer? One of the aspects of call center adoption that we're playing with some of our customers, we have early access to some of the AI-assisted call center capability, in which an AI agent is basically assigned as a buddy to the operator, who can then, the AI can make suggestions about what can be done, can look up relevant information during the call, and so the agent becomes super empowered to have all this information at their fingertips. And so really an interesting way to use new technology to empower the workforce to address the needs of the traveler much more efficiently. And then significantly expanding of the ecosystem, new partners, new sources of information. A big part of what our customers look for are different ways to gather more information to better serve their current customers. So they look at new sources of information, whether it's government open data or weather data or other things they can bring in. How do they integrate and use that data to predict and have more value? What we recommend to our customers is couple things. The first is really take advantage of the fact that I mentioned so much data is being created and gathered. You need to become a data-driven organization so that you can make predictions accurately off the best data you can find. And not only that, you can use data to do cool things like A/B testing or trying out different options or trying different variations. But you have to be willing to move away from those kind of gut decisions toward more data-driven decisions, and you got to have an organization that is ready and prepared to accept and understand how data is used to drive decisions. You want to make sure that we are a big proponent in Accenture of what we call human-centered service design. And this is not only looking at individual transaction experiences, but an end-to-end seamless experience. How do we avoid handoffs from one portion of an aspect of, all right, my trip to another? We did some work with a three-letter agency that does security at airports, and we talked with them about the security experience, and it's really fascinating. You know, everyone has their favorite friction points when they go to the airport, whether it's ID presentation or luggage management at the checkpoints and choke points. And what was fascinating, we talked to them about the security experience from book to gate. So the whole range of different players that are involved, whether it's because when you start to dig into this, you realize, you know, the local police manage the space outside the airport authority manages the airport property, and there's interesting handoffs that occur. And so are there ways that we can not make the individual be aware of those seamless handoffs, that it doesn't seem to be something where I have to repeat information because I'm moving from one aspect of my travel to another? So how can we reduce that? And then always, you know, transforming the culture to be digitally native and digitally aware. This is an understanding that, I know the other day when I was checking in, I went down to Raleigh and back on a one-way trip, or one-day trip, and I noticed almost everybody was checking in with their phones as tickets. Very few people have paper. And so that expectation of digital is very fascinating, and you need to have that culturally in the way you understand how your travelers work. Again, with my daughter, it's always fascinating because she's such a digital native. Nowadays, when I book and I get the pass that I can stick in my Apple Wallet on my phone, I check in myself, my wife, and my daughter. And to give my daughter the boarding pass, I open up the digital pass, I say share, and I text it to her, and it appears on her phone. And I know she won't lose it, right? Because the 17-year-old in her phone, they're like connected at the hip, right? So it's great. Like, she doesn't say, Dad, where's my ticket? I'm like, it's on. And she checks in like an experienced traveler. It's just fascinating. I can actually check in from my watch. It'll come up on my watch, the little QR code. I haven't been that aggressive to try that yet because I'd be embarrassed if it doesn't work. But I think it's pretty cool that I can do that. So a couple things. We talked about the digital transformation, how not only is the traveler experience, but also the back office being automated. How do we, and I know there was some talk earlier, and I actually saw this morning, the Wall Street Journal does a daily artificial intelligence briefing for executives, and they featured AppZen, which is a component of SAP Concur, which does this intelligent fraud analysis of receipts. And I was reading through the details of how this works, and just fascinating to say, you know, was the expense claimed done on a personal card or on the approved card, and can I match those up? And I know now it's fascinating, when my EA books my travel, I get an alert on my watch that says, you know, Accenture corporate card used for this amount, and I can see it as it occurs in real time. And so I really am fascinated by how that digital transformation is occurring, and, you know, across the different platforms that are in place. No surprise, right? Travelers are becoming extremely more demanding. They want convenience, they want digital, they want transparency. Where's my flight? How many of you now have like Flight Aware on your phone, so you can see, is my inbound flight on time? Right? Am I going to get out of here? So is the actual equipment coming in? I do that now too. Yesterday, coming back from Raleigh, there were a lot of cancellations on the board. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get home. And then I looked and I'm like, oh, the inbound is in the air and it's on its way. So I felt more comfortable that the equipment that I was going to be flying on had left its origin, was going to arrive on time. Actually, it was arriving early. It was great. And so I felt comfortable and confident as a traveler. And you see this across a variety of digital platforms. The reasons people like Uber and DoorDash, and they like these kinds of, they get super information. I use DoorDash to order food, and I know that my order's been sent to the restaurant. Someone is on its way to pick it up. I can see where they are on the street. I know down to the minute I can walk outside and get my food, be there as it arrives. And that level of information gives you that confidence. It's not, back in the day when I used to order pizza and 45 minutes later my wife would be like, where's the food? I'm hungry. And you just be calling the pizza joint going, where's my food, right? But now I can see it. I get that information, so I have that level of confidence, which is great. I talked a little bit about customization, this idea of how you really are personalizing down to how do we make sure that experience adapts to and addresses an individual's needs? Another good example of this, I was with some friends down at Disney World this past weekend, and an individual had an extreme allergic reaction from the room. And it was determined that the laundry detergent used for the sheets had some scent in it that he was highly allergic to. But he wasn't allergic to the towels in the room, which is kind of interesting. And they confirmed with the front desk that there was a different detergent used for towels and sheets. But knowing someone's that kind of level of allergy, they have the content, the ability to put down hypoallergenic sheets in the room. And so this is the kind of thing where, if you're aware of that on the reservation, the room is prepared so you don't have that incident of, oh my gosh, he literally had to go to the hospital and get treated for the reaction. But if you can hyper-personalize down to this level, you can address that ahead of time so there's no friction or no fear of engaging because someone knows you to a degree of the information you've shared. Virgin Hotels, for example, they know, for example, your favorite cocktail when you arrive, right? Or mocktail in some cases, and your minibar stocked with your favorite, salty or sweet treats based on what they know about you as a person. So I love this idea that it's highly the ability to personalize the experience. Another one I wanted to give you an illustrative example of is this kind of continuum of experience, right? So this is a map, if you will, that already starts with someone doing research about where they're going to go, personalizing the experience, downloading the app that helps manage their travel experience, using that to talk to the travel experts, sharing with their friends on social media that they're going somewhere. What does it mean when they start to prepare? What can they pack? What can they put in their suitcase? What do they have to carry on? All the way to the end so they enjoy. And then post-travel, which is also important, what's the experience like when the trip's over, right? Is someone thanked for their business? Do they have a reminder or some kind of takeaway that reminds them of how much fun they had or how enjoyable it was, or we appreciate the time you spent with us? And so this totality of experience is what we do from a service design perspective. But I like to remind people that there's a bunch of inspiration and pre-travel and post-travel activities that are also something that are available because of the level of information that we have and the ability to reach out and touch the individual experiencing the travel process. So it's not just in the on-trip or post-travel, even loyalty point or receipt processing, but even at the front end of how am I getting to my destination, what route am I taking, and how fun will it be as I take that experience. Couple interesting things too about connected experiences. So this is, when can I unlock my car with my phone, right? A lot of the hotel rooms have this now. I walk up, I can use my phone as a digital key, right? Do I get information about the car on my phone so I know how much gas is in it, how much have I driven? Can I auto put that in for mileage reimbursement, right? How is that information that can be, the cars are fascinating amounts of data, right? I know, anybody done the insurance thing where you buy the thing and you plug it in under your dash and you get a discount because it sees how you drive? I also track my daughter, again, how she drives. I know, I have an app on her phone that says how she's been accelerating. Did she do hard braking and all this other stuff, right? And, so it's fun to see how much that you want to share with an insurance company to lower your rates, right? But that information is fascinating, and how can we share and use that through devices like the phone, devices like the watch, check the engine, you've driven certain miles, the tire pressure is low. Right? There's fascinating ways this information can be shared. I'm a big fan lately, again, of the watch, so I get a little bump on my wrist and I can look up and I've got some notification that I need to deal on. And some of the car rental agencies are really getting to this in particular, which I find fascinating. A little bit of the hyper-personalization, we talked about that earlier. This is, how do we really make the experience personable? However, we also want to make sure it's not creepy. Right? So the idea here, of course, is, get to know me on my terms, right? Here's data about me that you should know. And I want to make sure you use that to make my experience stuff about me that I'm a little weirded out that you do know, and I prefer you forget, right? And so there's a real line about how to deal with that. And it's different for every individual, which is another real challenge. Some places are really good about this. Here's what data we have on you. You can choose what to share with us and what not to. And the companies that do that are transparent about the data they have about you, your ability to control that information, and your ability to let them, to give them the permission to use certain information for certain activities. Companies that do that really thrive because people appreciate that level of transparency, honesty. They don't feel like their data is just being mined, used, or worse, sold. And so this idea of balancing the level of information you use for that personalization versus the creep factor is a common one, and how it's protected. Companies that are really starting to look at individually encrypting every record of data differently, right? The technology exists. I have the horsepower to do this now. And so the key thing there is if there's a breach at a company, the worst case scenario is they get a bunch of encrypted data they can't use. Or maybe they can decrypt one record, but the vast majority of their records are protected because they're encrypted all differently. And so really advanced companies are thinking about how do they protect this information at hyperscale. And so how do they encrypt things differently? And so that they use things like blockchain, they use things like third-party escrow storage of data. These technologies are available to protect the data in the systems to address that. The AI element here is fascinating. We talked about it a bit earlier with AI regarding to fraud detection and receipt processing. But AI is also extremely useful in things that are just predictive in nature. Understanding what kind of restaurants you like to go to. Again, the allergy discussion is a key one, right? What restaurants serve different kinds of food and can be available locally. Same things for drinks and transport. Where I like to sit on the plane. What kind of car I like to drive, what kind of driver experience I want to have. I know for me, when I get the Uber app and it says, person known for great conversation, I'm like, oh, last thing I want to do in a car is talk sometimes. But, that's good to know. But I want them to understand that and predictively say, no, I'm going to route someone who might be more quiet or as a driver. So it's just fascinating how AI is being used to address this kind of ability to predict what kind of thing someone wants or how we can best serve and allocate activity as well. And so the better agencies are really getting on top of that. I mentioned earlier the fact my daughter's Gen Z and the millennials are kind of on the rise, but millennial expectations are fascinating. There's a big desire to have personal connections, to have the experience mean something. They're a little bit less about the material element of the transaction and more about how it makes them feel. And so what we try to do at Accenture from a service design perspective is tap into that expectation about their associated emotions with regard to engaging in the experience, and how do we judge that and change systems to accommodate that kind of need. They're definitely the digital natives as well. They expect to be catered to in that form and fashion. Handing someone a form to fill out or paper to deal with. Even I do this sometimes. I get a piece of paper and I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm gonna fill it out, and then what do I do with it? Then it's funny, I naturally just take a picture of it, right, and save it, so I have a record. But again, why am I, we're dealing with paper? No one wants to deal with that. So it's really fascinating to see how millennials have that emotional expectation of the experience, both digitally and how they move through the transaction flow. And again, what I'm finding is most agencies that are moving into digital modernization are moving from in the past, many of the systems were transaction-based. So this is the system you use to book a flight. This is the system you use to book a car. This is the system you use for the hotel. This is the one you use for food. This is the one all of the systems are different from a transaction basis. Modern systems are person-based, not transaction-based. They look at you holistically as a person and say that person element has things they need to do, but the person's at the center, not the business processes and transactions at the center. And I think people appreciate that when a system's designed around their human needs as opposed to the human being forced to adapt to the system flow. AI helps with this a lot. Chatbots are a controversial topic, but the really good ones actually are helpful. I can engage with a chat element almost to the point where I don't always recognize it's not a human. I can put in my flight number, I can get information about status, and it's rapid, it's fast, and that experience is more person-centric than it is, go find the menu choice that lets me do the thing I want to do. What's happening is the fourth and fifth industrial revolution that has this horsepower component means that the systems are powerful enough to adapt to humans instead of the humans having to adapt to systems, right? So that's a really powerful thing. I don't have to say, okay, in order to interact with this system, it used to be, what's the old one too? You'd say, I want to change my flight, and the gate agent would just pound away furiously on the keyboard, right? And tell you, oh, there's no flights, right? And so it's fascinating that they're really good at that. I remember way back in the day, I used to do my first electronic e-tickets, and I remember not having a receipt and going, oh, I need a receipt for my company. I actually need a paper receipt. And so I used to have to go to the gate agent and ask for a paper receipt so I could file it with my expense reports. And after a while, I would watch them type, and I'm going, can you tell me what you're typing? Because I want to tell the next gate agent how to be efficient at this. And so I learned like the F5, PF4 keystrokes to get tickets printed. I would tell her to do that. And so it really is fascinating that today there's that expectation that I don't have to do this. The systems adapt to my needs, not only as a traveler, but also as a travel service professional, that the systems are using AI to adapt to how I want to work and not necessarily me being forced into a certain transaction flow, which I find really cool. Another interesting aspect of this, though, is, for example, I know when I get on a United flight, they'll tell me, hey, we got free entertainment for you, but download the app before you get on the flight. And that's cool. But as you can imagine, all of us have different makes of models of phones and different OSs on them. I know Apple's relatively proud of the fact that 90% of their consumers are on the latest version of their operating system. And you might think, well, that's interesting. There's two reasons why it's important, though. One is obviously for security reasons. They constantly patch and address vulnerabilities, and they want to make sure you've got the latest secure version. But second is manufacturers of applications often want to know what capabilities are available on the device. And so some companies actually are aware of, they gather a little bit of information of the hardware you're running, and to that they can tailor the experience. And so, if you're like maybe my grandparents who have a flip phone, they know they can't have a certain kind of capability on their device. They might be able to interact and do some basic things, but they're not going to be able to download that United app to watch movies and things like that. So they might say, okay, for certain customers in our market, we may provide an individual device to compensate for the fact that what they have digitally isn't capable of a certain level of service that we want to provide. And so it's interesting that it's not only personal information about you as an individual, but also your technical and digital savviness, if you will, that makes up your profile. And that way, someone can figure out maybe how to best address your needs if you're someone like, my mom always has to use a stylus. She's germaphobic. She won't use her finger on her phone, which I find fascinating. But it's interesting to see, this kind of, how does someone interact digitally, because that's an important experience that's part of how that person will receive information and may communicate as well. And so I think it's just kind of neat that that information can be part of an individual's profile. This is really becoming possible because of something I call convergence of systems. There's an integration, and in Accenture we do a lot of integration work between disparate systems. But it's not only that kind of integration work, but also the fact that we're able to converge data from so many different sources, not just back office systems, but edge devices and sensors to get a full picture, mobile sensors, wearables, things that basically converge down to the data is divorced from the ability to deliver it in a way that I can build systems around the data pool of that individual, and I can converge that down into new IT technologies, which I really think is the idea. How do I have an integration platform? How am I building a way to aggregate this data so that I can provide seamless experiences? So this convergent thing is pretty important. Also fairly new distribution models. How do I share data? So secure sharing of data is a fascinating challenge as well. If I'm going to be sharing information among partners, is there a good way to do that in a way that reduces friction or reduces time to transfer data? And this is where things like the emerging kind of blockchain consortiums are available, where you can build out kind of this shared, secured, verifiable data that is tamper-proof to the point where it's usefully something that can be shared and objectively agreed upon. So kind of nascent still, but definitely a different way of sharing data among partners to help and encourage that seamless travel experience. So a fair amount of different innovation ideas in travel, all the way from refocusing the new IT, being digitally native across the board, different kinds of next-gen loyalty and marketing and the A/B testing I talked about earlier. The back office being equipped with the same technologies that the traveler has in order to meet them at a digital meeting place. The workforce that's very connected and at having more authority at the edge and data to make those decisions when they do so. And then finally, I guess, is this kind of fully engaged experience that has that kind of emotional connection and pleasure for someone who has to go through the rigor sometimes of a travel experience. So with that, I think I'm complete. I have time for questions, and I'm trying to get you out so you can have lunch too. So I know I was between you and lunch. But thank you so much, and we'll take time for questions.
Got a couple questions. Could you talk a little deeper into how blockchain may impact the travel industry next 3 to 5 years? Maybe give a scenario a little bit.
Yeah, so the blockchain is essentially a data sharing platform that allows me to not necessarily have 2 copies of data that I have to reconcile, but rather a shared repository that all of us have the same copy of data and can verify that it is accurate when it is shared. And so this really gets down to the point where, as a consumer, I might say, if I'm engaging with different providers, I want my data available in a consistent way that I can verify, that's shared among providers. And so I may sign up as an individual to having my data available on a shared blockchain for consortiums, so that that data can be used effectively to help my experience be better. It also might just be tracking for fraudulent type activities. So to make sure if I've claimed something here and I'm being reimbursed here, is that data being maintained in a way that's tamper evident to make sure that it hasn't been mucked with or isn't fraudulent? If I have a consistent, clear record that multiple people can agree upon, that makes that process a lot easier. So we're seeing a lot of blockchain in financial industry in particular for this kind of transfer of money and clearing. And I think you'll see it as well for anywhere where there's an experience where you have to deal with multiple providers of changing information.
Can you kind of touch a little bit on artificial intelligence as an enabler and kind of sketch out kind of where you think the tentacles are that would kind of connect to it? What are those data feeds? What are those kind of situational intelligence type things that you
Sure.
see coming into this
Absolutely.
to be able to support a traveler?
Yeah, it's funny. Most people, when they talk about artificial intelligence, they either think of Wall-E from the Disney movie or Terminator, right, or Skynet. So I always get the Skynet question on AI. I'm a big fan of everyone gets an AI buddy. Now, back in the day, that if you remember Microsoft Office, everybody had Clippy, the annoying paperclip. I don't think AI is going to be that annoying. AI will actually be an augmenter to you as you work. I caught a bit of someone else's presentation earlier where he mentioned his daughter was doing a book report, and of course, the first place she went was Google and had reams of information as compared to the 14-mile uphill both ways walk to the library, right, to get the information you need. Now I know when I'm writing a document, oftentimes there's a sidebar that is watching as I type and is suggesting content that I might find relevant when I'm writing something. And so what I believe will be the most successful implementations of AI will be personal. You'll get an AI assistant who will help make your day easier. And you might have a collection of them. Someone who predicts your trip, someone who recommends a restaurant. You'll probably have a collection of AI assistants that help you with certain activities. I know it's kind of creepy now a little bit. When I get in the car on Sundays, my phone pops up and goes, the drive to the grocery store is 20 minutes. And I'm like, I haven't typed in where I'm going yet. It knows, because that's my pattern of life. I go to the grocery store for my wife on Sundays. And so it knows that, and it's already telling me the best route to get there. So that's kind of nice. It's assistive, it's enabling, it's empowering. And so that's my hope. I know there are people who are concerned about AI making decisions that are biased or unethical or things like that, and it's technology. Technology can be used in good and bad ways. I know from Accenture's perspective, we have an ethical code of conduct with regard to how we implement AI, and it means just transparency, lack of bias. It means using it in a responsible way. So I think when I advise my clients about AI, I often talk about how are you governing an AI, how are you assuring that an AI remains compliant. In many ways, it's like having another worker. And so I hold my human staff accountable to certain compliance standards. I should hold my AI to those as well.
I think that's it on questions.
Okay. Oh.
Dominic, can you, so we talked about the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the next industrial revolution. What are you really seeing out there? I mean, now all these fascinating things that you just talked about, your phone, the artificial intelligence, the ability to tap into all these things, have we arrived at the fourth industrial revolution? Are we there and we haven't adopted everything yet? Or, are we just entering you mentioned Moore's Law, and it's just, other people did too, that is the rate of change that fast, that are we going to be able to keep up?
Yeah, it's a fascinating problem. I talk to my clients a lot about how are you making sure, I remember someone told me, for example, in some agencies in the government, there are 5 generations of people. So the rate of an understanding of technology varies dramatically.
Someone are flying the same plane.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Right. Or and so the change has become so rapid. I mean, I know in my lifetime I've seen technologies appear and disappear. Right. I had one of the first DVD players, and now my kids don't know what those are. Right. And so it's amazing how fast things are happening. One of the graphs I had that had that curve. So I think we're still in the adoption phase of the fourth revolution, where companies are becoming digital companies. But the leaders are becoming that kind of post-digital, where it's not only a digital experience, but it's digital, physical combined, to the point where how do my shoes tie themselves and give me feedback on how I'm walking to make sure I don't hurt myself? And so the fifth revolution is this real convergence of digital and physical. We're not there yet at all. We're still, I think, in the phase of companies fully becoming digital and leveraging and taking advantage of all the data they have.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Had a good time. Thank you.
Well, for old codger like me, that's pretty exciting stuff. And we did check. I think Jim Viditz already is logged on to the flight app, and he's tracking every plane flying around the world right now. At this time, we're going to break for lunch. We've got a full afternoon scheduled. If you would please check the schedule as to what courses or classes that you'd like to attend, I'd appreciate that. I think, these dialogues will continue this afternoon. So we'll wrap up the day at about 4 p.m. and we'll have a reception in the exhibit hall. I hope everybody can make it. And again, we'll have the piece of art that we unveiled earlier there available for everybody to look at and find out where you're in it. But thank you for the morning. To me, it was a very fascinating time, and we've got more to come. So thank you very much.